I thought my partner was sleepwalking. I was wrong. I woke to the sound of our back door sighing open and the soft slap of bare feet on the kitchen tile. The house breathed around me like an animal, the slow tick of the baseboard heater, the wood joists complaining under unseen weight. I lay still, listening to the hall exhale. Then I smelled wet dirt. The clock read 2:08. The light on the smoke detector blinked, green then black then green, like a slow heartbeat. Beside me, Ari's side of the bed was warm and messy, the sheets tangled in a way that said they had been, until moments ago, asleep. I whispered their name. The only answer was the clock and the house. We de-moved to that small place near the woods because Ari said the city air made their lungs feel thin. We had more sky there and less of everything else. The roads were narrow, the trees tall and stained with lichen that looked like old paper. If you walked far enough, the asphalt melted into dirt and then into deer paths, and if you stood still, the forest accepted you the way a lake takes a stone. Without hurry, without fuss, with a noise only you heard. The first week, there were new noises to catalog. The second week, they stopped sounding new and started sounding like ours. By the fourth, I could tell when the fridge kicked on from the bedroom. I could tell when a pine cone hit the porch roof. I could tell the rabbits from the raccoons. I could tell when Ari turned over in their sleep. I could tell when their feet touched the floor and took them somewhere they did not remember later. I slid my legs out from under the blanket, careful. The air had a winter bite even though it was early fall, the kind of dry sharpness that makes your teeth ache. My skin tightened. The wood was cool under my soles. I pushed the door open with 2 fingers until I felt the edge of the hall rug against my toes. I didn't turn on the light. The dark in that house wasn't complete. Street glow filtered through the pines and drew bars across the floor. The refrigerator's blue eye washed the kitchen in breathlight. The hallway smelled like laundry and dust. The other smell was richer, earthy, like someone had emptied a potted plant onto the floor and rubbed it in. In the kitchen, a trail of wet, dark prints dotted the tile. They were not large. They looked like Ari's feet, the long second toe, the soft, flattened arch. Each print had a blunt edge, sludge pushed outward by pressure. The trail came from the back door and turned, not toward the sink or the table, but toward the hall again. Back toward me, back toward the bedroom. My mouth went dry. The prints didn't go anywhere else. They stopped at the rug. "Ari," I whispered. The word brushed the air and died. I moved to the back door. It was closed. The lock was set, the deadbolt turned horizontal like a mouth lined against a laugh. The weather stripping stuck on the bottom corner sometimes, and I could see it had been pulled free and then pressed back in, a smear of dark on the knob. The cold came through like a wet hand over my face. I followed the prints with my eyes back to the bedroom and stood in the doorway. Ari lay on their stomach, one arm flung out, breath slow. The sheet was dirty at the edge where it touched their foot. We had a gentle kind of fight the next morning, the kind where you place your voice carefully and keep checking if you're hurting the other person. "I didn't get up," Ari said. They had their hands around a mug and their nails were clean, the half moon's pale. Their hair was a sleep toss still. "You know I haven't had an episode in years." "There were footprints," I said. "From outside, like you'd been in the yard." "I would never go outside at night like that. Not here." The last 2 words fell heavy. Ari's mouth grew tight. Their eyes slid toward the window, toward the line of trees that began like the edge of a stain at the end of our lot. "Maybe you were dreaming," I offered. I softened my voice. "We've had a lot of change, stress." They nodded, then frowned. "What did they look like?" "Your feet, they were your feet." "But they went back to the bed?" "They stopped there." "I didn't say, they came back to you." "I didn't say." I touched the sheet where the dirt had soaked into the cotton and my chest felt empty and full at once. We scrubbed the tile together until the water ran clear and gray inside the bucket. Ari kept their sleeves pushed up, and I watched a tiny scratch along their wrist quietly bead, red then disappear as if a mouth had kissed it closed. The house smelled like bleach and mud. We opened the windows. The wind came through the screens and made the curtains breathe like the house. It was a good smell then, cleaner than us. For a few nights, nothing happened. We slept heavy. I dreamed about changing locks, about counting screws and hearing them fall into the slats. On the 5th night, we woke to spoons on the kitchen table. They were laid out in a ring, teaspoons alternating with soup spoons, the metal reflecting the gray dawn. In the center of the ring sat one fork, tines pointing up, and one butter knife balanced across it, edge to edge, making a small, uneven cross. The spoon bowls caught the window light and held it like a bruise, dark in the middle, pale at the lip. "Okay," I said. My throat felt tight. "Okay." "This is a joke," Ari said, but they said it without humor, and I knew we didn't have friends who would drive out here in the night to make stupid art with our flatware. We checked the doors and windows. Everything was locked. We looked in the closet under the stairs. I pulled out the vacuum and the toolbox and a sweating box of paint. The air came out stale and chemical. It felt like peering into a mouth. There was nothing human inside except for us. We didn't call anyone. I wouldn't bring a neighbor into our kitchen and ask if they believed in spoons. I made coffee, and Ari stood with their hands clamped tight around the mug and didn't drink. There were other things. A circle of smooth stones on the porch that hadn't been there the night before. Pairs of shoes lined heel to toe in the hall, left facing right, right facing left, as if they were about to walk into one another. The house keys placed on the back step in a small fan like a child trying to make a flower. The cold came through the glass in the back door in sheets. We woke with goose flesh even under blankets. It was as if someone had left the door open and forgotten to come in. "We should get a camera," I said on a morning when I could not stop yawning. I was holding a neat stack of pennies I'd found balanced on the bathroom faucet, each coin still damp as if it had been washed. "That's invasive," Ari said. "We didn't move out here to be watched." They were stacking bowls. They paused. "But I want to know, too." We ordered 2 small cameras that didn't look like cameras. We placed one in the kitchen facing the back door, and one in the room off the kitchen that had been painted a green that always felt like it was about to be evening. That room had windows that looked straight at the woods. From there, the trees were so close that the glass felt like the only difference between being inside and not. It was also where Ari liked to sit, on the old couch we dragged off the curb when we were too broke to buy one. They said the light through those windows made them feel like they were holding a secret, and it didn't hurt to keep it. We set the cameras, and then we waited to be surprised. Instead, the night did what it always did. It made our house small and the trees large. It lit the smoke detector up and down. It pulled at the eaves. It rested its heavy hand on the roof. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember waking like I'd been permitted to. I remember the cold. We watched the footage at breakfast. We had decided to watch in the morning because we thought daylight would work like a net. We thought anything we saw at night would be smaller once the sun was in the room. The kitchen camera showed the back door. At 2:02, the porch light came on by itself. The camera adjusted and the picture bloomed then dulled. The back door opened like a breath. Ari stepped in. They were barefoot, wearing my gray sweater damp at the cuffs. Their hair looked darker, like the night had combed something into it. They moved slowly as if the space in front of them was thicker than the space behind. They closed the door. They stood very still. Then they turned their head and spoke toward the sink. Their mouth opened. Their hand came up, palm empty, palm up. I looked at Ari sitting beside me and they kept their eyes on the screen, their fingers locked in a ball on their thigh. On the video, Ari waited and then smiled, a small, careful smile that made the left side of their mouth bend. They gave a tiny nod. They walked to the hall and then the camera didn't see them anymore. The picture stayed on the door, and after a time, the porch light went out. We watched the other angle. From that view, you could see into the green room and the long rectangle of the window beyond it. At 2:03, Ari passed through and stopped, looking out like someone standing on a platform waiting for a train you can't hear from where you are. Their mouth moved again. I turned up the volume. All I heard was the thin night noise, wind and branch, something small on leaves, until the volume slider was maxed and the speaker hissed and hummed and a voice came through that was Ari S and not Ari S at the same time. The cadence was right, the pitches, but the texture was wrong, like the voice had been drawn with the wrong pen. "I told you I would," Ari said in the picture. No, just me. They're asleep." They leaned toward the glass a fraction, like someone had leaned back toward them. I pressed my lips together hard enough to feel my teeth. Then, under the noise, under Ari's voice, something else reached into the room from far away, as if the trees had opened their mouths and made a sound. It wasn't loud. It was the opposite of loud. It had the shape of a whisper, but without breath. It had only my name, sifted through the house like dust. The hair along my arms rose as if the house were now colder on the inside. My name again, closer, still quiet. The syllables brushed each other, almost like a hand on a table. "That's someone messing with the mic," I said, but my throat didn't let the words out steady. "Someone?" Ari asked. "Who?" The camera saw only Ari in that room. Their shoulders rounded as if someone had told them a story and it had gone on too long. They nodded at the window. Then they left the frame. I watched the window for a long time, as if something in the glass would move if I watched hard enough. All that moved was me, reflected in the black rectangle of the screen and the little green light that blinked like a heartbeat. We didn't talk much that day. Ari made soup and didn't eat. I walked around the inside of the house and put my hand on things that belonged to us, as if pressing my palm into the couch or the table could remind those things that they had our shape now and were not to be borrowed. In the afternoon, I found a backpack under the bed. It held a clean pair of socks, a knife in a leather sleeve, a coil of bright orange twine, a half-full water bottle, and folded very small and very neat, a hand towel that had dried leaves in it like a pocket of autumn, and a dark patch where it had been damp and then not. It smelled like pond. "It's not what you think," Ari said in the doorway. Their voice stayed soft even when I didn't. "I don't know why I made that, I don't remember." "You brought in the mud," I said. I held the towel by a corner. The dried patch felt stiff. "I don't know," they whispered, and their eyes shone, and as soon as I softened, as soon as I stepped toward them, they put their head on my shoulder and breathed into my sweater the way they do when they're trying to hide that they're shaking. We slept with the lights on. It did not help. The house had its own light. The fridge lit. The smoke detector pulsed. The clock's red numbers made a little wound in the dark. The windows, even with the curtains pulled, had a glow to them like an animal's eye deep in a bush. On the third night after the whisper on the recording, I woke to the sound of the back door again and knew before I opened my eyes that I would hear the knife drawer slide open next. I heard it. I lay there counting, and the number 10 felt like a balancing point. I got to 9, and my body tipped up. The kitchen smelled like night in a way that had nothing to do with time. It had to do with wet leaves and dirt that had been pressed and finally sprang back. It had to do with cold. The back door was open. The screen door showed a triangle of yard, the grass silvered with dew. Ari stood with one hand against the frame like they were reluctant to let go. They kept their face turned toward the trees. "Ari," I said carefully, "you're asleep." It was something my grandmother used to say to my mother when she walked to the bathroom and forgot what she was doing. It was a way to guide without shame. "I'm not asleep," Ari said. They sounded annoyed. They stepped out onto the porch. The night pressed against their hair. The porch boards ticked like cooling metal. "We can talk in the morning," I said. My teeth clicked. "Please." They shook their head. "They don't like mornings." I stood there with my palm on the cool edge of the door. The porch light buzzed and threw light up under Ari's chin so their face looked strange, their eyes shadowed. I said, "Who is they?" They turned their face toward me, and something in their expression came apart and showed a child's stubborn, sweet center. "The twins," they said. I almost laughed because of the word choice, because if you're going to be haunted on the edge of the woods, you don't expect the thing choosing you to have a name that sounds like a daycare. I didn't laugh. My throat didn't know how. "Twins," I said. "They're not twins like you think." Ari looked past me at the sink, as if a thought were there drying with the plates. "It's just what they call themselves when they want you to feel like you already know what they are." "Ari, there's a place." They swallowed. I watched it. "In the woods, where the water's flat, like glass, and if you stand there long enough and you ask right, something stands with you. It looks like you. It smiles a little wrong the way you don't. It moves when you don't. It knows your name like a secret it keeps in its mouth. They call themselves a good word so you don't run." The porch light flickered once. The night rubbed against the screen door, a velvet hand that made a chittering sound in the mesh. I thought of the backpack under the bed. I thought of the towel and the pond smell. I thought of the ring of spoons, the knife and fork like a compass misaligned. I thought of the voice in the green room that had been a whisper and my name. "You met them," I said. "You went to the place." Ari nodded. Their face had the stubborn set again. "They like me." Their mouth tried to smile. It made my stomach hurt. "They said they like how I listen." "And what do they want?" I asked, but I already knew. The hair on the back of my neck felt lifted and held between two fingers. "They want you," Ari said, and the child shape of the truth made me feel sick with tenderness and anger and something else that was not anger. We went inside. We sat on the floor because the chairs felt like they would break under this. Ari told me the rest sitting with their back to the cabinets, knees drawn up, fingers working at the hem of their sweater. I didn't go because of them, they said. I went to walk. After midnight, I can breathe. It's like the air's taller. I went a little farther than usual, and then the path sort of found me. It got quieter. That's how you know you're there. The noise lays down. The water is like a mirror even when it's dark. I thought I was alone, but I was. I saw me. It wasn't a trick of light. It smiled like someone loving you in the wrong way. It put its hand up like this. Ari's hand lifted, palm to me. I should have run, they said, but if you've ever wanted something to understand you without asking, and then it does, your body is not a body anymore. It's a door. I listened. It told me there's a way to fix what felt broken. It said I had to invite it properly. It said it could show me what my life would be like if I hadn't. If I did, they trailed off. They squeezed their eyes shut. Ari carries a softness around certain years like a bruise under clothing. There are things we didn't fix, and we don't pretend we did. They said the word twins like it was sweet, Ari said after a moment. They said some people bring things, offerings. It's not like that. You don't need to feed them. You need to agree. That's the only food. Agree to what? I asked, but I knew that too. The kitchen light felt too hot. My mouth felt cold. To a trade, Ari said softly. They take your reflection so the world will be easier, and you take theirs so you won't be alone. They held my eyes so I couldn't look away. It doesn't work if you go alone, they said. It has to be given. I stood. My knees made a sound like an old stair, an old house. I walked to the sink and let the water run until it was cold and then colder. I put my hands in. I waited until my skin hurt and my bones felt like small bells. We are not going back there, I said finally. But when you tell the woods no, the woods doesn't hear you in words. We tried to pull ourselves into what felt ordinary. We ate cereal and watched a stupid show and made fun of the way one actor ran like they had a broom in their shirt. We went to bed. Ari's breathing steadied. The house settled like large furniture. The red clock blinked. I lay very still and told myself a story about everything being just the weird way new houses are. When you're awake too long in the dark gets a texture. It was the same as the texture of the towel from the backpack. It was the same as algae drying to a rough skin along the edge of a dock. I closed my eyes and saw that texture. I opened them and the clock said 2:01. I didn't hear the door this time. I heard my name. It didn't come from the hallway. It came from the window, through the glass in the bedroom, like someone very close to the other side had put their mouth near and let the sound leak. It had the same wrong pen marks as before. It had my name like an answer and an appetite at the same time. I sat up. Ari sat up. We turned our heads not in the same instant, but close enough that a stranger might have said together. Don't, I said. We have to, they said. We dressed in the dark with human clumsiness, bumping into each other and soft swearing when a toe found the bed frame, apologizing out of habit to wood. We didn't turn on the light. It felt important not to reveal our faces to anything that might be waiting to see if we were brave or easy. I took the backpack because I didn't like the idea of leaving it as if it were some kind of permission we had granted without reading the paper. Outside, the yard was a different place. The grass was all one animal, breathing slow, dew fur shining. The trees began without warning, the way a word begins in a mouth without anyone deciding to say it. The path wasn't a path. It was a series of slight agreements between ground and foot. The air was very still. If you lifted your hand, the cold licked your bones. We walked without speaking. Ari kept to my left, a half step ahead, like their body knew where it was going even if their mouth didn't. The dark was not olfactory, and yet I could smell it. It smelled like wet rock and old wood and something metallic like a coin left in a mouth too long. The place announced itself in quiet. The crickets didn't stop like in movies. They were just very far away, and then they were not at all. The trees made a circle without making a circle. The ground sank. The water was black and flat, but not dead. It had the held-tight feel of a face under glass. The pond was small, big enough to take one breath and see both ends in the same breath. It held the sky the way a black pan holds oil. It swallowed what it could and offered back a sheen. The trees on the edge leaned in, their heads touching in the water like a family gathered not to be seen gathering. I stood and watched the surface watch me. Ari went forward with the easy surety of someone stepping back into a conversation they had left only to get a drink. Not this, I said. It felt like speaking in church with your mother sitting next to you. It felt like the word had too much weight to travel, and yet it did. You'll see, Ari said, not looking back. You'll see it isn't so bad. They stood at the edge, their toes curled in the cold mud. They held their hands out like there was a scale and they were balancing something invisible on both sides. The night lay quiet. Then it changed. The surface didn't ripple. It thickened. It had no temperature, and yet my body thought it was colder. The smell of algae came up, the old coin taste more whole in my mouth. Something that was Ari's height rose under the water's skin, the way a person stands up in a very shallow dream and their shape shows through. I watched my own face rise too, in the angle of the water off to the right as if waiting in the wings. It was my face. It was not. The chin had a softness mine did not. The mouth made the "there you are" smile someone wearied by love makes when the person they are tired of worrying over finally comes home. It lifted one hand. It placed its palm against the underside of the water's lid. It waited, and the waiting was the worst part. "You don't have to," I said. "I do," Ari whispered. I heard in their voice all the times they had wanted the world to be a little kinder, and it was. I heard the years their chest had been a closed room because breathing was hard. I heard my name and how it had always been a rope they pulled to find me in the dark. They don't take, they accept. There's a difference. There isn't, I said, but I said it like a liar because I wanted to be wrong and right at once. I didn't see the twins, their twins, fully until it was too late to pretend this was only water. Two shapes where there should be only one. Both Ari and not, both intent, both with their mouths slightly late to the movement of their eyes. "You invite them," Ari said obediently. "You say, 'I give you my reflection.' And they give you theirs, it's a trade. Then life becomes easier. You don't feel the same weight. It's like wearing someone's coat who is always warm." They said it like a mantra someone had offered them with slices of fruit in a hand and a lap to lay their head. They reached for me without taking their eyes off the water. They squeezed my fingers and let go as if to say, "See, I'm not leaving you, I'm making it so I can stay." The pond's surface shifted a fraction, a breath that didn't belong to wind. The thing with my face lifted its other hand. The surface held. Beneath, the fingers opened and closed. I couldn't tell if they were reaching for air or for me. "Ari," I said, and stepped forward. My shoe sank into mud and held tight, as if the ground liked me now and didn't want to let go. "Don't say it." "I give you my reflection," Ari said very softly. It was not loud, but the word give has a shape. It leaves your mouth and stays shaped long after you spit it out. The surface of the water flexed. I saw Ari's twins smile. I saw mine twitch, its smile arriving half a beat late and too deep. I moved. I didn't think to pull or shout. I thought to cover Ari's mouth with my hand the way you do when you're afraid the only thing keeping something thin in the world is breath. I slipped in the mud and grabbed their arm instead, and my fingers closed around bone and wrapped the way a hand knows how to wrap a wrist, you know. I yanked. We came back the way people come back from a hard wave, clumsy, shocked by gravity, soaked in cold that wasn't wet. Ari stumbled and turned their head away from the water like a child refusing a spoon that tastes wrong. The surface trembled as if a thing under it had hit against a lid. "No," Ari said, but there were two no's. One was the kind your mouth makes when it's still hungry and someone takes away the food. The other was a warning. "Come home," I said. The words pushed through my teeth. "Come home now." I dragged them. It was not romantic or brave. It was messy. I cursed in my head and grunted in my throat and dug my heels into the ground and felt the mud try to keep us. I felt the pond's cold reach up like it had fingers. I felt my own face looking at me from the surface, not moving when my head did. It smiled, and the smile arrived late and made my teeth hurt to see it. We turned our backs fully. The twins did not reach out of the water and grab us the way a story might please itself with fear. They waited. That was worse. Waiting makes a person into their own jailer. We took 3-4 steps, and the trees filled the space behind us with the sound of being trees again. The air moved. The thin noise of crickets returned, not loud, but enough to realize how quiet it had been. I looked once more and saw the surface go slack and take back the shape, erase it, like a sheet smoothed by a hand. We went home. We didn't speak. The yard was black and then gray. The porch light knew us and came on. Ari shook and didn't want to be touched, and then climbed into me like a cat under a blanket and pressed their face into my ribs and made a sound that the English language didn't have a good word for. I held them and said we were here, and the words were both prayer and promise and an argument with something I didn't want to name. In the kitchen, the spoon ring waited. There were other things we hadn't noticed in the rush out. The mirror over the sink had been turned to face the wall. The black rectangle of the TV had a sheet taped over it, the painter's tape neat, a clean border around the absence. The bathroom mirror was undisturbed, but the hand towel lay on the floor, as if someone had been standing in front of their own face and decided to be gentle and then decided not to be anything at all. "We're going to break them," I said. "You can't break them," Ari said, and I hated the way they said you like it was different from them, like they were already sliding to a place where I couldn't be. "Watch me," I said. I did the small things first, a person clinging to the idea that big things can be solved by a series of small ones. I pulled the sheet from the TV and took the TV outside and laid it face down in the yard like a coffin. I pulled the bathroom mirror from the wall and leaned it against the porch step and hit it with the hammer until it became many small, startled rooms for us to look sick in. I tilted the long mirror in the bedroom behind the dresser and pushed the dresser until my back burned. I turned picture frames down. I threw a dish, and it did not help, so I didn't do that again. We left the mirror over the sink for last because it was glued on, old adhesive with the grip of a dry hand. We pried at the edges. The frame cracked. The glass groaned. It sounded like a voice trying to lift itself out of someone else's throat. It came off with a sharp breath, and then we took it onto the porch like someone asleep we were worried about waking, and then I stood there with the hammer and touched my lips to Ari's hair and said I was sorry for more than this. Then I brought the hammer down. It felt important to hit the thing in the middle. The glass fractured like ice. The pieces held to one another and then came loose in landslides. One slab slid down and nicked my shin, and I tasted blood back of my tongue, even though that made no sense. And then the mirror was 100 eyes, and none of them could give me my face right quick enough to catch me. Ari started breathing again in a way that wasn't a pant. Their shoulders lowered. Their body unfolded from its huddle. They took the hammer and hit once more, and the sound the glass made was a kind of thank you. The house felt smaller, safer, brutalized. We cleaned. We swept until our hands ached. The shards made tiny songs in the dustpan. The sink held glitter. The night had taken its weight home. The air came through the kitchen screen and did not smell like pond. The clock blinked. The smoke detector pulsed like a lighthouse for a softness that had nothing to do with the sea. We slept in the living room with the lights on because we are animals and animals understand fire. We woke tired but not dead. We moved as if time belonged to us again. Ari sat on the couch and drank water and then tea and then water. We didn't watch the footage. We didn't want to hear my name said wrong. If this were ending right, this would be the part where the house learns our shape and keeps it. But the world doesn't take endings from us. It gives them. We didn't go to work for a while, which is to say we didn't pretend to be other people for money. We made a list of things we could control. We changed the back door lock to a new one with a key we watched the locksmith cut. We bought material to cover windows that had too much night in them. We set a bowl of salt by the sink because my grandmother had done that once for other reasons and it had seemed to work. At noon on a day when the sun felt like it had been given a raise and wanted us to notice, I walked past the green room and stopped. The windows stared empty. Not one caught the light from the yard. For a second I saw our reflections in the glass, not perfectly, but enough to recognize my shape and Ari's behind me and the tilt of Ari's head when they lean in to listen. Then my reflection smiled. I didn't. Ari didn't. It was small, like someone nodding to a joke they'd already told. It arrived a half-beat late. It went away faster than a thought. I wiped the glass with my sleeve, an animal act, and found myself whispering sorry to the window like it could be hurt by streaks. Nothing else moved. The yard was a yard. A bird scissored the air. The smell of warm wood came into the room and painted the air the way sun can sometimes, where you feel like you are walking through a color. "We're okay," Ari said behind me. Their breath touched the back of my neck like the first sip of something warm after a long cold. "We did the hard thing." I nodded. I put my hand on the glass. It was the temperature of room. My palm left a map. That evening we ate on the porch and tried to act like we didn't sit there because we were keeping watch. The air carried the smell of damp grass, cut wood, the sweet rot of last year's leaves under the hedge. In the distance, someone's dog announced the world. The sky got that bruised color that isn't a bruise but always makes me think of skin. "I'm sorry," Ari said, after chewing only one bite and then not swallowing it for a while. I wanted to make it easier for us. I didn't want you to have to hold me so much when the nights got bad. I didn't want to be the reason you were tired. You are not a reason, I said. I put my hand over their hand because hands are words too. You are a person. They smiled like a person. They did not look past me while they did it. They did not tilt their head like someone listening to a second thing. At 2 a.m., the lights were off and the house felt less like a lesson and more like a place you sleep. The fridge hummed. The smoke detector blinked. The clock read 2:00 and then 2:01 and the numbers changed the way a tide becomes a tide. We lay on the couch because the bedroom was too much for us. I had the remote in my hand and it pointed at nothing. Ari's cheek lay over my ribs. Their breath was my breath's companion. When the back door sighed, it felt like a joke told by someone who doesn't understand timing. It was a small sound and still too loud. The cold walked into the room. The hair on my arms lifted as if something had taken my skin between its fingers again. I did not move. Ari's breath disappeared into a hold. We waited. We waited the way people listen for a heartbeat on a screen and then hear it and then don't. A foot on the tile, the knife drawer, then everything stayed waiting. The night forgot its noises again. The room held its breath. The window held. We held. I couldn't stand up. Sometimes your body is a bench in a church that someone else's story sits on. I said my name in my head like someone trying to make sure their own mouth still belongs to them. I turned my head very slowly and the window gave me my face, and the TV screen, even dark, gave me my face. In one, my eyes moved the way they move. In the other, they lagged. The back door closed with a gentle patience. The cold pulled back under the cupboard, into the hall, into the vent, into its own quiet. The fridge kicked on louder. The smoke detector blinked as if to say it had always done that. What did we think it was supposed to do? Ari breathed again like a person. The night reset. We reset with it. In the morning, we found a new pattern in the kitchen. Not spoons this time. Books. 3 books I'd left stacked on the coffee table now lay open on the tile, their pages making a lackadaisical clover. Each page was a mirror page, 2 faces facing, and the seam down the middle. I recognized a sentence from a book I'd read at 17 about how people lay their heads on someone else's chest and only then believe they're alive. The words lay there like a prayer in a language you think you know until someone asks you to translate it. In the sink, the salt bowl was knocked over. The salt had scattered, a thin line of white across the steel and the counter, like a shore drawn wrong. They're angry, Ari said, but not with fear or satisfaction. With the measured awe of someone watching weather in a film. We made them a promise and broke it, I said. We didn't, Ari said softly. I did. I sat on the floor. The tile was cool. I felt very tired. I looked at their feet. They were clean. I put my hand over them and Ari lifted my hand and put it on their knee. We go on, I said. It sounded like something my grandmother would have knitted into the corner of a blanket. We let it be angry. We're allowed to be alive even if the woods thinks it can make a better argument. Sometimes, when you say a thing about the future, the present tries to contradict you with a small act. That afternoon, the wind came up hard and a tree somewhere in the next property cracked and came down like a sigh pushed too far into failure. The power went out. The house sighed its own long exhaustion and then became a different animal. The smoke detector died. The fridge went quiet. The green room windows held a cooler light. We lit candles not because we needed light in the day, but because human brains need flame when the rules change. The mirrors we hadn't grown back. The TV in the yard looked like a grave that hadn't been filled right. We made sandwiches and underlined the word ordinary very hard in our layout of things. I went to the bedroom for blankets and stopped because in the thinned-out afternoon, the long mirror we had shoved behind the dresser showed itself to be not quite as covered as we had thought. A sliver of glass looked out into the room. It showed a slice of a person. It showed a slice of me. My hand came up without me and pressed against the dresser, and my throat made a small sound because in the mirror slice my fingers did not touch the wood where mine did. They hung in air like a question. I put the blanket down. I pushed the dresser flush. The scrape of wood on wood was too loud in the quiet. In the living room, Ari had their head back against the couch cushion, their face turned toward the window as if they were tanning on the idea of light. I sat. I put the blanket over them. They curled and took it like it had been cold for a while and now was. The power came back with a shrug. The lights did not come on because the switches were down. The fridge hummed and I forgave it for being itself so loudly. The smoke detector blinked back to life. Evening came without apology. We laughed at a joke that wasn't very good. I thought, we are animals and they are animals, and sometimes the woods is a country that rejects visas without knowing why. We moved through the week. There were nights we slept and nothing happened. There were nights something happened, and we pretended we didn't hear it and afterward felt guilty like parents who let their kid cry themselves to sleep because the book said it was good for them. We kept the cameras off. That was a decision we didn't say out loud. I started noticing symmetry everywhere. The way two cups, put down careless, still made a pair. The way the salt and pepper shakers leaned toward each other with the gravity of couples in their 70s in diners. The way our shoes, even if kicked off, found their mate toe to toe like how bodies sleep. I started missing mirrors the way you miss a light switch in a hotel bathroom when you wake in the dark. I used the blank TV for my hair, a spoon for my mouth. I watched my reflection tilt a half beat after I did and then tell myself I was tired. I adjusted my voice in the way your body adjusts in a doorway when you're not sure if you're coming in or going out. The night breathed around us. On a new moon, the yard felt like a place that had lost its keys. The darkness wasn't the absence of light. It had its own heft. It lay over the grass like a skin. I woke to Ari's hand on my shoulder, not shaking, only there. They didn't speak. They stood. We didn't turn on a light. We are animals. We do certain things when certain moons hang in certain windows. No, I said. It wasn't a command. It was a wish. They touched their chest with their palm the way a person pledges allegiance to something they don't entirely believe in but want to be seen believing in. They went to the door. I followed without deciding to. The yard received us. The path found us by our weight. The trees communed. The pond held itself like someone holding a breath for a photograph. I grabbed Ari's hand before their feet hit the mud. Look at me, I said. Look at me and tell me you want me in the morning, not a twin, not an easy coat. They did. Their eyes had the shine they get when they are full of hurt and hope at the same time. I always want you, they said, and I believed them. My belief did not undo the water. The surface lifted like a veil, two Ari eyes, two Natari mouths. The one that would be mine if I let it. It tilted its head. The sound it made wasn't sound. It was the pattern of a voice underneath the membrane of the world. I give you my, Ari started. I kissed them. Not an answer. A refusal. My mouth was cold and their mouth was cold and the heat we made was small and furious. I pulled them backward. They came. Their fingers dug into my wrist and my wrist bones knew that they were being asked to hold. Something brushed my ankle in water that was not there, a sensation like hair and electricity. I didn't look. Looking has a power I don't pretend to understand. I kept my eyes on the black between trees and it moved like the inside of a person's palm. The world breathed out. The sound came back. Crickets counted the night. A frog somewhere had a sentence to finish. The pond lay down. We walked until we were in our yard, which is to say we walked until the grass remembered us. We were not brave people after that. We were people who were tired. We were kind to each other the way you are when anyone trying to sell you a life at a discount has just left your porch. We did not break any more glass. There wasn't any to break. We bought a small mirror we kept in a drawer for shaving and then stopped using it after I watched my mouth finish something a fraction after I'd decided I was done. If you are waiting for a big scene, we have already had ours. The rest is the little scenes that are where people live. You straighten the book someone opened on your floor. You wipe the salt from the sink. You put a plant on the windowsill and it thrives. You hold hands in the grocery store. You choose the apples with the twin bruises because they taste the same as the ones without and nobody scratches their neck thinking they got away with anything. And some nights, fewer as months go on, but still some, the back door sighs. We sit very still. We let the night count us and not haggle. We remind the house of our weight by staying in it. We put our hands on the table and feel the wood's memory, how many meals, how many elbows, how many rings wet with water. We talk about leaving. We talk about how leaving is a way of giving something a shape it might not deserve. We don't leave. We plant bulbs in the fall like a dare. They come up in spring because the ground is not an enemy even if the water is a mouth. Once I dreamed I was brushing my teeth and the mirror over the sink had grown back and I didn't have a mouth. I woke laughing because that's not how emptiness works. You don't lose the thing, you lose the proof of it. I kissed Ari and they said, "Morning," and their mouth was warm and belonged only to them. I clean the floor beneath the dresser every so often now because I can't stand dust I can't reach. I slide the dresser an inch, enough to get the long vacuum nozzle back there. When I do, I catch a strip of myself in the sliver the mirror can still make. I see my hand move a fraction later than my hand moves. I do not smile. The slice does sometimes, and after a while it stops. After a while, it waits. After a while, it just looks back and looks like me. Some nights, when the light is wrong, the window glass in the green room gives a flash that makes me feel like someone has snapped a rubber band on my wrist. I turn my head. The glass only shows the yard with its small, ordinary catastrophes: moles, mushrooms, the slick where a snail crossed and silvered the world. I tell you this not because it has an ending, but because some endings are a room you have to live in without a door that opens to a street with a name. I tell you because I want you to picture the glass of a dark window, and then picture your face in it, and then picture that face smiling a half-beat too late, and know that if it does, you will go on anyway. You will break what can be broken and leave what can't. You will be cruel to the right things and kind to the others. You will love someone who almost gave you away, and you will sit on the porch with them and eat when it is time to eat and listen to the night's small noises, which are the same in a mouth and in a pond. And last night, halfway between the house breathing out and the house breathing in, I stood in the kitchen for water. The glass was cold in my hand. The window was black. The yard was a suggestion. I lifted the glass to drink and saw myself in the pane, and this is my report. My face lifted too, my mouth tilted a fraction late, and then, small like two fingers tapping from inside, the dark made a smile where I didn't. I set the glass down very gently so it would not make a sound. I turned off the light. I went back to bed and lay down and pressed my back against Ari's back until our breaths were an argument I wanted to lose. The house breathed. Somewhere, water held itself unchanged. I closed my eyes and felt the space between myself and myself as thin as breath and terrible and full of love.